Good.
And that's
why
on-
the chair is removed and all that good stuff. Okay.
right? Good afternoon, everyone. We'd like to get started if we could. We are going to start with the Maryland School for the Deaf, and we have Laura Hyde as the analyst, and Ms. Ann Miller and Jennifer Yost Ortiz will be answering after the analyst.
Laura, you need to be over one more. They reprogrammed it, so. You can do that.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
And congratulations to all of you who figured out how to make the elevator get you all the way to the fourth floor this afternoon. I haven't either. Took me a while.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I'm Laura Hyde. This is the budget analysis for Maryland School for the Deaf. If you'll please look on page 1, which is the operating budget summary. The MSD's fiscal 2023 budget increases by $3.2 million, or 7.9%, to $43.7 million. This is primarily reflected in increases to personnel expenses, contractual services, and plant maintenance and operations. If you please turn to page 2, Exhibit 1, Federal Stimulus Distribution. You can see that in fiscal 2020 and fiscal 2021, MSD received $1.2 million in federal stimulus funds based on enrollment as follows: $430,000 or 37% in Gear 1 funds, $479,000 or 41% in Gear 2 funds, and $254,000 or 22% in SEA ESSER 2 funds. If you'll please turn to page 3, Exhibit 2. These are federal stimulus fund expenditures for Maryland School for the Deaf between fiscal 21 and fiscal 22. You can see that the school spent approximately $173,000 on information technology, or 36%, $128,000 on curriculum, 27%, $114,000 or 24% on equipment, $36,000, 8% on personal protective equipment, and $23,000 or 5% on instructional supplies. If you please turn to Exhibit 3. This is on the bottom of page 4, Overview of Agency Spending. In MSD's fiscal 2023 proposed budget, salaries and wages total $33.3 million, or 76% of MSD's total allowance. Contractual employment accounts for $4.5 million, or 10%. Contractual services total approximately $2.6 million, which includes $700,000 for plumbing and aging equipment repairs, $292,000 for HVAC systems, $128,000 for stormwater management, and other additional expenses. Supplies and materials receive $1.3 million, fuel and utilities receive $800,000, and all of their remaining objects receive less than 1% of this allowance. If you please look at Exhibit 4 on page 5, this is Maryland School for the Deaf enrollment. An enrollment formula in section 83A09 of the education article determines MSD's annual enrollment count, which uses a 4-year average to mitigate sharp increases and decreases in the student population. For the 21-22 school year, MSD's total enrollment is 550, which includes 53 enhanced enhanced services students, 70 early intervention students, and 427 school-age students, which for formula funding purposes totals 462. Due to an increase in the per pupil amount mandated in Chapter 36 of 2021, MSD's per pupil funding increases from $7,390 in fiscal 22 to $8,310 in fiscal 23. MSD's formula enrollment also increases by 14 students from 448 to 462 in fiscal 23. This change results in an increase in MSD's formula funding of approximately $2.5 million, which is 7% greater than fiscal 22. If you look at at Exhibit 5, proposed budget, this is on page 6. Out of the change in the proposed budget of $3.2 million, MSD's largest increase is personnel expenses, which is approximately $1.3 million in general funds. Of these large increases, reclassifications total $919,000, which includes an increase in salary for the new superintendent and funds to reassign positions in alignment with Chapter 36 requirements. MSD's other general fund increases include a total of approximately $1.9 million and include $563,000 for contractual services, $547,000 for plant maintenance and operations, which includes replacement parts for aging HVAC systems and plumbing, and increases in supplies and maintenance costs, $203,000 for contractual services, which reflects the first year of a new pay plan for contractual employees, $130,000 for the purchase of a small bus and replacement of 3 vans with over 100,000 miles, and other smaller changes. If you please turn to page 8, this is personnel. MSD is authorized for 334.5 regular positions and 82.4 contractual positions in the fiscal 23 allowance. The agency does not add any new regular positions in fiscal 23. Due to decreased enrollment, contractual positions for instructional personnel decreased by almost 8 positions from fiscal 22 to 23. However, with the return to in-person instruction, MSD expects to hire back contractual employees in fiscal 23. In fiscal 23, MSD also has less than a 1% budgeted turnover rate. If you please look on page 9 at Exhibit 6, this is students headed to college, training, and work. Exhibit 6 shows that MSD's 2021 graduating class, 57% of the students plan to attend college, which, due to the challenges students faced in learning during a pandemic, represents a 33% decline from the 2020 graduating class. MSD reports that students in the 2021 graduating class are attending community college for a year or plan to attend college in fall 2022. For MSD students pursuing a certificate of program completion, 47% plan to work or enter a training program after graduation, even though they may face difficulty finding work or entering a suitable training program during the pandemic. MSD anticipates that the percentage of students headed to college, training, or work will return to pre-pandemic levels with the graduating class of 2022. MSD does not have any issues, and DLS concurs with the governor's allowance. The rest of this analysis provides information on MSD's return to in-person learning, an audit update, and details of their superintendent search. This ends my presentation, and I stand for questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Okay. It is nice to see you in person.
It's nice to be here.
Thank you, same here.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Ann Miller. I am half of the interim leadership team this year, and I am normally the Chief Financial Officer at the Maryland School for the Deaf.
And good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Yost Ortiz, and I am the interim Chief Education Program Officer. And thank you for the opportunity to testify before you all today. Maryland School for the Deaf continues to provide a rich and wealthy environment for our children and a whole child approach for the education of our children throughout the state of Maryland. Because of the pandemic and the many challenges we have that we face, we've continued to thrive and been innovative. Our theme is now forward together. And that's exactly what it is that we're doing. We are moving ahead together. And thank you all for your continued support for our school, and we concur with the budget analysis as proposed.
Okay, are there any questions? Comments? Okay, that was easy. Thank you for being here.
And thank you so much. Have a good afternoon.
Okay, we're going to go next to the Baltimore City Community College. Ian Klein is our analyst. We have Dr. Deborah McCurdy, President, BCCC here, Ms. Eileen Weitzman, the Controller, Mr. Richard Walsh, Senior Analyst, Coordinator, and Ms. Becky Burrell, Vice President, Institutional Effectiveness, Research, and Planning. Ian, take it away.
All right. I don't see the presentation on the screen yet.
Here we go.
Excellent. All right, so we're going to start on page 4 with Exhibit 1, which shows enrollment from fall 2015 to 2021. From 2017 to 2019, BCCC's enrollment grew by 721 students, or 17%. However, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, enrollment has fallen significantly from 2019 to 2021, decreasing by 1,045 students, or 21%. The continuing student and first-time full-time student populations decreased in both 2020 and 2021. However, one bright spot was an increase in the dual enrollment student population, which grew in 2020 and 2021, increasing by 236 students. DLS asked the President to comment on the success the college has had with the dual enrollment student population and if successful enrollment strategies for this population could be adopted for others. Exhibit 2 on page 6 looks at the successful persister rate for BCCC. While four-year institutions use graduation as a measure of success, community colleges use the successful persister rate. A successful persister is a student who attempts 18 or more credits in their first 2 years and after 4 years are still enrolled, have graduated, or have transferred to another institution. Exhibit 2 on page 6 shows the rates of college-ready students, those who did not need any developmental courses, and developmental completers, those who completed required developmental coursework and later completed their program course requirements. Students who are developmental completers at BCCC have tended to have higher persister rates than those who were considered college ready. This is proven true again for the 2016 cohort, with the developmental completers attaining a successful persister rate of 78%, while the college ready students attained a rate of 71%. Exhibit 3 on page 7 adds the developmental non-completer category. Developmental non-completers are students who did not complete their required developmental coursework within 4 years. As seen in Exhibit 3, at 27% for the 2016 cohort, these students have a persister rate that is significantly lower than the college-ready and developmental completer populations. DLS requests the President to comment on what initiatives BCCC is undertaking to have more students complete developmental coursework, as students who complete developmental coursework tend to have significantly better academic outcomes. Moving to the education and general expenditures, Exhibit 4 on page 8 provides a summary of the budget changes for unrestricted funds by program from fiscal 21 to 2022. The E&G total increases by $17.7 million, or 36.5% over fiscal 2021. This includes $8.5 million for institutional support that is primarily for contractual services associated with the new enterprise resource planning system, $2.9 million in academic support for costs associated with adjuncts, tutors, and contractual vendors to support online learning applications, $1.9 million in operations and maintenance of plant for emergency repairs and deferred maintenance costs, and $1.7 million for student services as a result of the filling of vacant positions. Moving to the impact the COVID-19 pandemic continues to have on the college. Exhibit 5 on page 9 provides an overall summary of the total funds that were allocated to BCCC through the various higher education emergency relief, or HERF, fund and state stimulus programs. In total, BCCC has received nearly $25 million in stimulus funding, of which $8.7 million was required to go directly to students in the form of emergency financial aid payments. Exhibit 6 on page 10 provides the distribution of the various stimulus funds by fiscal year. As is shown, BCCC plans to expend $19 million in federal and state relief funding in fiscal 2022. In terms of the financial impact the pandemic has had on the college, Exhibit 7 on page 11 documents the fiscal 2021 effects. For the 2020-2021 academic year, fiscal 21, BCCC moved to a remote-only instruction model. With this shift, BCCC suffered a decline in enrollment and the corresponding revenue generated from enrollment, including tuition and fees, as well as auxiliary revenues, which totaled $1.9 million. When including additional lost revenues and expenses related to the pandemic, as well as the Board of Public Works reduction, BCCC experienced an overall budget shortfall of $5.2 million in fiscal 2021. BCCC was able to address this budget shortfall by utilizing federal and state HERF funds, as well as identifying operational savings to offset this balance. The fiscal 2022 outcomes through the first half of the fiscal year, as shown in Exhibit 8 on page 12, documents the impact the continued enrollment decline as a result of the pandemic has had on the college's finances. In total, through the first half of the fiscal year, BCCC has a projected shortfall of $2.6 million. BCCC has already identified $1.6 million in HERF funding that will be utilized to address this shortfall, as well as noted that an additional $3.8 million will be available should the second half of the fiscal year also prove financially difficult. When including the $3.8 million in HERF that BCCC has identified to utilize for offsetting shortfalls for fiscal 22, the college will still have roughly $7 million in HERF remaining for institutional purposes. The President should identify how BCCC plans to spend the remaining HERF balance. Exhibit 9 on page 13 provides an overview of the BCCC funding formula. As is shown in the exhibit, absent hold harmless funding, BCCC's fiscal 2023 allowance would be $34.5 million, or $5 million below the previous year's funding level. As a result, the hold harmless provision takes effect, resulting in the institution's funding level reaching $39.5 million. When the English for speakers of other languages funding is included, BCCC's total funding level reaches $39.7 million in fiscal 2023. Discussion of the proposed 2023 budget is found on page 14, with Exhibit 10 on page 15 identifying those budget adjustments. Of note, the personnel adjustments in fiscal 2022, totaling $1.4 million, are budgeted within the Department of Budget and Management statewide expense program as proposed deficiencies and are not part of the hold harmless calculation for fiscal 2023. In the fiscal 2023 allowance, BCCC receives a total of $4 million in additional funding to reflect fiscal 2023 personnel adjustments, resulting in a total general fund allowance of $43.7 million. For other state agencies and higher education institutions, these adjustments are again budgeted within the DBM statewide expense program. However, for BCCC in fiscal 2023, these funds are provided directly within the general fund appropriation. With these funds now part of the BCCC general fund base appropriation, beginning in fiscal 2023, the new hold harmless level will be $43.5 million, which is $4 million greater than the current hold harmless level. Also of note, BCCC is scheduled to receive $5 million in PAYGO funds for deferred maintenance projects. When reviewing the personnel data for BCCC, as is shown in Exhibit 11 on page 17, the college's vacancy rate has exceeded 20% since June 2020, and with a vacancy rate of 27% as of December 30th, 2021, is 23% higher than necessary turnover. The President should comment on the continued high vacancy rate, identifying how much the COVID-19 pandemic attributes to this rate, and the President should also comment on any cabinet-level positions that are currently vacant and identify when those positions are expected to be filled. Moving to the issues, which begin on page 18 and go through page 20. The one issue discussed involves full-time equivalent student enrollment and the Merit Scholars Program. As is shown in Exhibit 12 on page 18, total FTE enrollment has steadily declined at the college since 2011. The budget anticipates BCCC's FTE enrollment to grow substantially, increasing by 870 full-time equivalent students, or 29%, by fiscal 2023 when compared to the fiscal 2021 actuals. The President should comment if the anticipated growth in FTE's enrollment identified in the budget is realistic, given the steady overall decreases in FTE enrollment since 2011, and identify how the college plans to achieve these targets. Exhibits 13 and 14 on pages 19 and 20 provide an update on the outcomes associated with the Merit Scholars Program, which has helped to bolster declining overall enrollment but produced academic results that are slightly below that of the non-MSP student population. The DLS recommended actions are found on pages 21 and 22, and these are requests for the submission of reports providing an update on institutional realignment, enrollment in the Merit Scholars Program, and an update on IT infrastructure renovations. With that, I conclude my presentation and would be happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the analyst? Good job, Ian. Thank you. Okay, Dr. McCurdy.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman King, members of the Education Business Administration Subcommittee. I'm in my third year now at BCCC. I'm joined this afternoon by several, Becky Burrell, VP for Institutional Research, Dr. Lizo Jones, President of Academic Affairs, Eileen Watsman, our Controller, Richard Waltz, our Senior Budget Analyst, Kate Dixon is our Assistant VP for Facilities, and Eileen Hawkins, Director of IR, our new Director of Procurement, as well, and Alanza has joined us, along with VP Thomas over Con Ed in the facility area, and Ms. Green is here as our internal auditor as well. Let me take this opportunity to provide the testimony in support of Governor Hogan's recommendations for Baltimore Community College. We, as our peer institutions as well, have suffered great disruption over the last almost 2 years. For 15 months, we have been out working virtual, so we're really just getting back. In January, we had a false start. We thought we were coming back mid-January, and when the variants hit, we stayed out another 2 weeks to get some things settled. We've been a mass vaccination site. We have testing through CVS on the campus that has continued as well for the community. Our mask mandate continues to be in effect, and we right now are looking at working with 2 entities for mandated vaccines as well. As with others, we're experiencing the great resignations across the country with so many individuals, many not looking to come back or looking to come back under other circumstances. Sometimes it's related to ADA, FMLA, sometimes people want to resign or retire, but we're also experiencing much what our counterparts are. So we've been back since January, and we expect that we're going to see many more disruptions as staff continue to settle into the return back to the campus. But let me point out that BCCC, given our population, our demographic does better face-to-face. So what we do intend to do is have a strong virtual side as well as face-to-face. We must get students back to the campus in order to take advantage of the various on-campus service programs as well. Let me reach out to Ian Klein. We've been back and forth all week with Mr. Klein as well in terms of process, and he's just done a super job for us as well and been tremendously accessible. So you have our response, our written testimony. I can keep some of this brief and go to the questions, but do want to acknowledge we're aware of our enrollment has declined across the 15 other two-year institutions. We're probably seeing a comprehensive decline somewhere around that 10% mark as well. A number of our programs, though, are still excelling. Our Mayor's Scholars Program continues to grow, and that really is that front-facing student entry program coming in for first-time freshmen. Dual enrollment continues to grow, and you'll see that as well. Enrollment planning, we're back at the table with the planning, and we continue to do that virtually as well so that there's more of a seamless transition between the academic areas and the workforce areas as well. We're focusing on special populations, which includes those areas, MSP, dual enrollment, veterans, international. We're scheduling our courses around students and what students need. And what we're seeing are students vying for coming back face-to-face. They simply appear to do better, or they're more comfortable face-to-face. Focusing on our overall retention efforts as well. We've implemented other intervention strategies so that in the past, if students had not paid bills by their first day of courses, they would be really withdrawn from the institution. So we put in more payment plans and so forth. That's going to be tremendously helpful. In another area that's tremendously helpful is the college had a very antiquated way of assessing students' performance, which meant you could be on, you either were in good standing, you were on academic warning, or you were dismissed. It doesn't make sense for today's standards, and we've implemented a probationary status, which means now you're in good standing. If you're not, you're on warning. You can go to probation prior to dismissal. This was critical. It may not sound like much, but it is when if you were on academic warning, you could have taken one class, been on academic warning, and then went immediately to dismissal, and we've intervened there. That's going to save several hundred students per semester in this regard. I can tell you we're keeping up with the realignment process and our obligation to the state with our 12 realignment tasks that continues to guide this institution through a stage of continuous improvement overall. Madam Chair, can keep my comments there and go right to your questions.
Okay.
okay? The 5 questions that are within the document and our response. The first question has to do with our enrollment, and the question 1 is about the president should comment on the success that the college has had attracting the dual enrollment student population, and if successful enrollment strategies for this population could be adopted for others. We would argue and say yes, absolutely. The college has increased the number of dual enrollment students, and if you're following in your packet, it's in our response document, our cover letter, and then it's right in the response document starting on page 5. You can see by the chart that we have pulled out that dual enrollment continues to grow. I've been here 3 years. I came from a state where dual enrollment was 50% of our population, and so I know it can work, and it works well in terms of reaching out to students, and I will continue to argue that Baltimore City Public Schools, if we could reach out and say every student should graduate with at least 6 hours of higher education, we'd begin to see more of a pathway and inroads into higher education and more success in terms of completion. You can see very early on where dual enrollment was, and you can see even with the pandemic how much dual enrollment has increased, in addition to our P-TECH programs as well. And I'd like our academic vice president, Dr. Jones, just to articulate for a second in that regard.
Absolutely. Good morning. So our dual enrollment program, when I first got here in the fall of 2019, we didn't offer a number of courses. We didn't have a wide variety. It was basically your typical English and math. And so when we met with city schools, we started talking about other options and going out and working with other schools. And we've been able to work with their curriculum and with our curriculum to determine what additional courses we were able to offer. So we're now offering them art courses, music classes, American Sign Language. So we've really upped the number and variety of courses that we can offer. And we're taking that back also to developing new programs so that when the students complete their high school diploma and they've taken all these different courses that interest them, they can then come to the college and take a program that those courses would fit into. So we're currently starting an American Sign Language program that we hope to have up and running for the fall semester. And we're looking at a geoscience program as well. So we're really trying to take the courses that we're looking at that are of interest to the city schools and looking at new academic programs that we can offer as well. Thank you.
Question 2, if there are no responses there at this time. Question 2 really is about our students benefiting from completing developmental coursework. A high percentage of our students coming in must take at least 1 or more developmental courses. What we know is that when students complete developmental coursework, they're more likely to persist. Regarding that, the question is that I should comment on what we're undertaking to have more students complete developmental coursework, as students who complete the coursework tend to have significantly better academic outcomes. Again, we have intervened even at the pre-pandemic levels. We were beginning to look more seriously at this population to determine how we could better influence their persistence. One big ticket, and it really benefited us as well when we moved to virtual, was the embedded tutoring. That means that the tutors are brought into the classroom, not sending the students directly to the tutors in the first instance. So many of these classes have embedded tutors. We also use this model for MSP and for some other coursework as well, to say that the tutors would be embedded and they would literally be sitting in the classes with students so they would understand the coursework and the requirements as well. The auto-enroll program as well, or initiative that goes along with embedded tutors, means that students in certain classes are automatically enrolled for tutoring the same time that they are signing up for their classes. And Dr. Jones, if you can talk a little bit more about the auto-enroll, because that's significant when a student, rather than our having the student be proactive, the institution is proactive in responding to what we know the students are going to need.
Absolutely. So mostly what we used to have for our tutoring model was tutors would sit in a room and wait for students to show up. And we all know that doesn't work. And so we took going remote as a possibility to look at our tutoring model to change what we did. So by embedding tutors into our high-risk courses, we were able to then bring all that information back, and we developed Canvas course shells for tutoring. And that allows us to say, okay, any student that's registered in our statistics class, we can pull all of those students into a tutoring shell for statistics, and then take the embedded tutor who has sat in all the coursework, and they can then supply that tutoring shell with the course reference material resources. They can also do discussions with the students. They then would reach out to the students and say, hey, I haven't seen you in the tutoring shells. How are you doing? Are you okay? So it was us going after the students to ensure that they were getting what they needed in order to help them be successful. And just to give you an idea, in the fall of 2021, just for the developmental courses alone, we had over 6,000 entrances into the tutoring shells. That allowed us to have a huge access to the students and help them really be confident in their coursework and be successful in their coursework. Thank you.
It's helped that we've hired the success coaches through the American Vista grant as well. I had similar in Ohio. We did very well there. We had up to 5 of these success coaches on the campus with us at all times, and so we're looking at really developing the models that are going to be sustainable, that we can come back and provide the data to say, we know this is working because of this. So the developmental aspect in terms of the success coaches as well, I think in the math area that you've now assigned someone to help coordinate all of this as well, Dr. Jones, and that's going to prove to be successful as well. Question 3 is on the fiscal side, and it has to do with our decreasing, the decrease in enrollment, which is a corresponding decrease in tuition and revenue, as well as our auxiliary revenues as well. And the question is focusing around the $3 million HERF that we've identified may be utilized to offset further COVID-19 related budget shortfalls. BCCC will have roughly $7 million in the HERF that could be utilized for institutional purposes. Identifying how the college plans to spend the remaining HERF balance. I can tell you that we absorbed and can absorb the HERF to a great extent. We've looked at all the categories. We've had discussion across areas and certainly across the cabinet areas. We're looking at campus safety and security replacements, much needed for the college. This is an institution where we have certainly a tremendous backlog of deferred maintenance, and so we're looking at all of the options and opportunities for us to come forward to provide a better and a safer place, certainly in the first instance for our students. And so this happens to be a huge project coming in at about $3.4 million, which will replace all of the cameras and much of the door hardware and so forth that will take us to more of a swipe card system and really improving what's there. That's going to be a huge ticket item. Institutional, other support for facilities, other institutional needs that have to do with other safety protocols, looking at our Mayor's Scholars Program that we're really obligated to pick up tuition and books and so forth. For the past 2 summers, we have picked up the shipping costs for our students to send them the books. They can't come to campus, and so we paid for the shipping. In the summer, we paid for the shipping, and we paid for the textbooks for all students, and that certainly was a big success. And then throughout the year, we pay through UPS to ship the books directly to the students. And so this is a huge amount that we have absorbed that is going to make a difference for our students. And Ms. Weitzman, as the controller, certainly can give some additional detail in terms of how these costs really break down, so you're not just looking at a large figure and not really understanding what we put behind those figures are all legitimate and needed items.
Yeah. Hello. Yes, our focus has been on student support and campus safety. And the majority of the HERF spending that we're going to be doing is on student aid. And so as Dr. McCurdy stated, we're going to be helping students with their balances that have had trouble because of COVID-19. We're going to continue to pay for the summer books. And we're going to continue all year long, the rest of the academic year, and ongoing to pay for the shipping of those books. So that's a big category of where we're going to spend a lot of the funds. The campus security, Dr. McCurdy already talked about. There's a number of facilities upgrades, including PPE, continued PPE for safety and replacement of anything that we've already, provided. For other institutional support, we're going to have CDL training and also upgrade other labs. And finally, we're going to continue to support the areas that support our students, like financial aid, some of the assistance that's needed to strengthen the programs until our ERP is up and running. So our focus has been on student support, because students come first, and also making this campus safe for our students and our faculty and staff.
Thank you. And just for the record, when we talk about the security replacement upgrade at $3.4 million, that's about 459 cameras and 740 doors, amongst everything else that has to go in with our warranties and our other authorizations and so forth. That's a huge project to take the entire campus and do the appropriate upgrade. In the past, the college has had piecemeal software, piecemeal security systems, lighting cameras, and nothing was interfacing, and this was the opportunity to take it and to really send a message that it's going to be a very different place and that it's time that everything has to be replaced. That has not happened, certainly in the history of the institution. The fourth question is on personnel, and as I indicated in my opening comments, we're not unlike what's going on at our peer institutions and certainly not what's going on across the states, and that this asks that we comment on any cabinet level positions currently vacant and identify positions that are expected to be filled. Also, talking about the high vacancy rate and identifying how much of the COVID-19 pandemic attributes. I would say in the last couple of years, COVID-19 and the variants have had a tremendous impact in terms of what we're seeing. We're getting requests each day for people who either are asking for accommodations. If the accommodations are not coming through HR, people have, in some instances, have chosen to go. We've had early retirement. Some people have said, no, don't want to come back. I'm afraid to come back. Others, in terms of some of the enhancements at the institution, have made some choice. It's a huge turn for this college to go to a new ERP system. That means everything you've done for the last decade and longer is now going to be transformed with a new ERP system called Banner, and it's going to change all of our front-facing systems. Some have said, nope, I think it's time, I don't want to convert, and let me step aside and retire. So we've had a variety of people in many different categories choose something different. This doesn't suggest the lack of need at the college. It says we're going to be in a waiting and a holding pattern like every other institution until things settle, as we continue to reorganize, as we look at our projected enrollments that are suggesting that we will have these positions filled, need these positions and probably more in order to respond to what's a targeted almost 7,000 student headcount that we now have been informed and working with the state to say by, I believe it's 2027, that our enrollment should take off. If you really look at the enrollment, the fall before the pandemic, we almost hit the 5,000 mark. I believe we were on our way. 4 months later, COVID hit, and everything changed, and we began to see something very different. This is our recovery period. The positions will go into the recovery in terms of what has to happen to maintain adequate service and the performance for the institution in carrying out the functions. On the cabinet side, we've seen some transition. Currently, we have an assistant, the vice president for finance and administration. We had an individual sitting up until the last 5 weeks, and the VP for advancement. Both of those positions are in ongoing searches. And so we're certainly feeling very confident that both of those positions will be filled in the short term. We're also responding to the documents that some of you may be aware. Prior to my coming to the institution, I arrived in late 2019, and in 2018, the study was done regarding the personnel at the institution. It was called the Edbridge Report. That report addressed many areas where it was suggested there were some staffing needs that needed to change, and as the new administration came in, and we've been charged through the Realignment Task to realign the institutional operations. There are 12 of those tasks, and part of that is the personnel and where people are sitting and how we operate. And so all of this is in line with what we are supposed to be doing. And as I've said, COVID-19 didn't do anyone any favors, but it is at this point suggesting that we are moving forward with filling those positions where we need to. In some instances, we will hold until we have the administrator on board so that they can begin to develop the staffs and identify new skill sets that are going to be needed to complement what's already there. That goes along with task 6 on the realignment task in terms of the comprehensive review of positions and functioning at the institution. Question 5 has to do with enrollment and MSP. That has to do with the question that talks about their anticipated growth in FTEs and whether or not that's realistic given the steady overall decrease. Since 2011, I was not at the institution in 2011. I came in 2019 where we began to see the surge in enrollment and then identifying how we plan to achieve these targets. I believe we are. We have not talked about anything since I've arrived. We don't talk about the increase, the decrease. Our focus has been on the increase. Our focus has been on the demographic, who we serve, and on the territories and the outreach. Our focus has been on Baltimore City Public Schools as one of our #1 feeders and other populations and targets who we should be serving. When we look at what we've provided you, we know we have pockets of influence where we can demonstrate that there is success for growth. One of the pieces that we wanted to provide was simply
Can I
looking
stop
at-
you for just a second? Senator Elfworth has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, thank you, Dr. Bird. We can sense your passion for this, and we so appreciate it. And I know we all know, we've heard from many folks of about folks retiring, folks leaving. It is an employee market right now, and appreciating your high vacancy rate. What is your plan moving forward to attract more full-time staff? And I know that you have an interesting kind of structure of contractual staff. Have you rethought that structure in order to hire more and get your vacancy rate back down?
I think it is I understand what you're saying, and I think it's a combination. So if you look at what we have posted, we're posting the full-time positions. So we're not looking at replacing those with contract positions. If there is a full-time position and someone goes in on a contract basis, it's more because it was the quickest way for for us to put someone in while the search is ongoing. It's never intended, because it
Okay.
doesn't serve us well.
Right.
To say you have a contract person who may be less committed overall to the institution, but the direction really is to fill the full-time positions and then to look at what we need on a contract basis. Some of those contract positions go with workforce, and they're supposed to be contract based on the dynamic of what's going up and down in the workforce. But it was never intended that we would have a disproportionate number of individuals on the contract side versus the full-time side. We're coming out of the pandemic, so we're gonna need a minute to recover.
Okay.
We're not certainly hiding those positions, we're putting them out there. But if there's a need, and I can give you a straight example in terms of payroll positions are at a premium, not just here, but across the country. And so what we've had to do is immediately try to fill. In order to keep payroll moving, you immediately have to fill. If you can't get a full-time position, people still have to be paid. And we have worked with several agencies to say, would you send us several contract people? And if you look online, those positions are being posted.
Okay, but I'm hearing you that once we get kind of a little further out of the pandemic
Yep.
and we have time to reset, that your goal is to certainly increase the full-time staff and decrease your contractual staff.
I think that balance is already there
Okay.
if you're asking, this is giving us, the realignment is giving us an opportunity. I'm not avoiding your question.
No, it's okay.
The realignment is giving us an opportunity to look at the staff complement that we're supposed to have and then fill those positions with full-time people, not contract unless it's going to be seasonal.
Okay.
Sometimes on the facility side, it's seasonal, workforce, it's seasonal. Or if there's immediate need, I'd rather have a functional area grab a contract person as opposed to sitting with nothing. So our responsibility and the intent is to fill those positions.
Okay,
Full-time permanent, not contract people, unless that position was already a contract slot.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Then the last, Madam Chair, question 5?
Go right ahead.
Okay. Question 5 then was on the FT and how the college plans to achieve, and I've talked a little bit about the winter. Some of this is how we're restructuring. So the chart looks a little bit funny if you look on page 10 of our response document. The chart looks a little bit strange, and we would attribute that to probably there had not been the type of planning that needed to go into winter. And so how they have increased winter, when I arrived at the institution, you were running a winter session with about 6 classes. None of that made sense, and I came in new and indicated, I don't even think we need winter. Someone kind of yanked my chain a little bit and said, oh, yeah, we do, let me tell you why. And then it became, let's plan for it then. And you can see the difference in terms of winter shooting up, almost doubling, and I expect that as we add more classes, we're going to see more success there. So we're focusing on the continuous improvement in our student services. There are lots of gaps there as well in terms of services and how you serve students, our operational efficiencies. Just getting into Baltimore City Community College might take a student a week to 2 weeks to get in. It should take you no more than 2 days. And so changing our operational efficiencies has been huge. The portion that I mentioned about moving students through from warning through probation, then as a last resort to dismissal, even there has to be some other retention efforts. Task 9 is critical as well because that's about our ERP system. That's a $7.4 million new technology system that has come in, and I really want the committee to understand that Baltimore City Community College has operated with an antiquated, archaic information system for probably the last 25 years. This is my 6th or 7th institution, and 25 years ago, I can tell you we didn't have an HP LAN system. We had something more sophisticated. Even then, we were using a banner system. We've had approval for that through the state, working through Do It. We are in now the 2nd year of implementing. That will be, the implementation is scheduled to be completed. in December of 2022. The first module is going live next week on February 28th. That is financial aid in terms of changing how we serve students and how we get students in and out of this institution, as well as our other functional areas. And so overall, I think in terms of what we're doing for our customer relationship management, that will allow us to better utilize the data, how we can assess our prospects and our demographic, how we do our recruiting. All of this was antiquated and required that people do mountains of work by hand instead of using the technology that would ensure our efficiencies.
Right.
If there are questions there, Madam Chair.
I don't see any questions, and I'm looking at the operating budget recommended actions, and it shows that you agree with all of those.
Yes, ma'am, we do, with the exception
Okay,
of two.
can I just say, we have several witnesses yet this afternoon, and I have one more college to do, so if you could kind of shorten your remarks a little bit, we'll be able to get everybody covered this afternoon.
We do agree with the operating budget recommended actions. We are asking for consideration on number two. We are simply asking that we can integrate two reports into one because the data overlaps. And so on recommendation two, the
Okay.
Enrollment and Merit Scholars Program, that requires two reports 4 months apart. And we're simply asking for consideration that we put both reports together and do one report that would be due November 30th. That's
Okay.
the only change that we're
Members of the
asking
committee,
for.
I don't see any reason why we can't do that. That's fine.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee.
Okay, thank you. We have Cindy Smalls from AFSCME, Catherine Dixon from BCCC, Michael Thomas from BCCC.
Madam Chair, we had one of our employees from BCCC who had signed up.
Was that Michael
Nina?
Thomas? Catherine Dixon?
No.
Cindy Smalls? You're Cindy Smalls. Okay. Go ahead.
Is it okay if Nina had?
Sure.
signed up? Okay, great, and I'll just be brief. My name is Cindy Smalls. I'm with ASME Council 3. Actually, I'm just here supporting Nina, who wanted to, who works at BCCC and wanted to weigh into the budget process and just speak on a couple of things. I thank the analyst for his analysis, and I just want to raise and lift up the vacancy rates, which prior to the pandemic has always been an issue for our council, and it continues to be. And with that, Madam Chair, I will give it to Nina.
Thank you.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Nina Koneski, and I am a member of ASME Local 1870. I've been with BCCC in some capacity for over 20 years, and I've been permanent staff for the past 10 years. I work in the Office of the Registrar, and I just wanted to talk to you about the staffing issues and salaries. First, with the staffing shortages, it weighs on all the employees in different areas of the institution. One being my department, which has lost 3 people, which have never recovered. Financial aid, which has lost 4 to 5 people and never recovered. Advising lost 6 people, never recovered. Business and finance, 7 people and never recovered. So we have these open positions, which has caused a heavy workload on all the persons that are still there, and it's very overwhelming. My second issue is salaries. I don't think that the salaries are, I guess, competitive enough, if you will, for the cost of living in Maryland. You shouldn't have to sit and decide whether or not you're going to pay for physical therapy for yourself and your child, or just one or the other, because that's the position that I have been in myself. I've had to decide whether or not if I'm going to have physical therapy or if I'm going to give the physical therapy for my son, because I can't afford to. So that was pretty much what I wanted to speak on regarding the salaries and the staffing shortages, because it is extremely overwhelming.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Okay, so Catherine Dixon and Michael Thomas are not here.
We're here, but we're part of the.
Okay, okay, now I gotcha. D. Fitzgerald Smith,
Not here.
Liesl Jones,
She spoke. The first
Okay.
team was the
Okay.
administrative team.
that's all we have then. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Next, we have Salisbury University. Sarah Baker is our analyst. We have Dr. Charles White, president, Dr. Karen Olmsted, provost and senior vice president of academic affairs, Dr. Janet Warmock, vice president of administration, and Dr. Dane Faust, vice president of student affairs and enrollment management.
Share this.
Wait for the analysis to come up. Okay, I'm going to start with Exhibit 1, which shows trends in first-time applications. And this provides an early indication that students would come back to campus. And as the pandemic continued in fall 20 and 21, in general, institutions expected a decline in the percentage of students who would enroll and therefore increase their admittance rate. And Salisbury was not an exception, increasing their rate to 79% for fall 20 and 86% for 21. Despite these higher acceptance rates, since fall 2019, the numbers accepted students who enrolled decreased by 304. Exhibit 2 shows the trends in fall enrollment with decline in the second year. In fall 21, enrollment declined 6.9%. And since the pandemic, enrollment has fallen almost 13%, or about 1,000 students. And this has been driven by a decline in continuing students, especially this past fall when 535 students did not return. On a brighter note, after 3 years of decline, the number of transfer students increased by 40 students. And after dropping 17% in 2020, there was a slight increase of 3 students and first-time students. We asked the president to comment on how Salisbury will be able to stabilize enrollment and bounce back to pre-pandemic levels. And will this lead to changes in business and the academic models? And comment on efforts to reverse the decline in continuing and transfer students. Turning to Exhibit 3 and retention rates. While it does not appear the pandemic affect the 21 cohort, in which the second-year retention rate only declined by 1 percentage point to 79%, it does seem to have impacted the 2020 cohort, where the third-year rate declined to 62%. Exhibit 4 shows the 6-year graduation rates, and overall the graduation rate for all students has exceeded 74%, and for the last 2 cohorts of African American students have maintained a rate of 70%. Exhibit 5 compares the 6-year graduation rate of Pell and non-Pell first-time, full-time, and transfer students. Overall, non-Pell students graduate at a higher rate than Pell students. And transfers, both Pell and non-Pell, graduate at a higher rate than first-time, full-time students. And I'm going to turn to Exhibit 6 and affordability. And this compares the cost of attendance with the net average price. And overall, the net average price is almost 30% lower than the published price. Exhibit 7 shows spending on institutional aid. And while spending on aid almost doubled to $11.8 million by 2020, that spent on need-based aid fell by almost 50%. And this was due to a change in reporting in which prior to 2016, students with financial need who received a scholarship were reported as being need-based aid, and now they're reported as receiving scholarships. In 2020, though, need-based aid only accounted for a little less than 16% of total expenditures. Turning to federal relief funds, as shown on Exhibit 8, Salisbury received a total of $32.2 million, of which $14.4 million was designated for financial aid. Of these funds, the majority, $16.8 million, will be expended this fiscal year. Exhibit 9 shows how these funds not designated for financial aid will be used. And as you see, almost all the funds, $17.6 million, were used to cover tuition and fee revenue loss due to enrollment decline, and auxiliary revenues related to reduced resident hall occupancy in '21. Exhibit 10 shows budget changes by program area for '21 and '22, and overall expenditures increased $18.3 million. Of the $3.7 million increase for institutional support, half is related to contingency funds to cover revenue shortfalls and/or unanticipated costs. SU has already overspent its budget for COVID-related testing and monitoring, so therefore will be dipping into these funds. $1.3 million increase in instructions is related to funds that were received in the supplemental budget number 4 last year, and these are being used to hire 5 positions in the College of Health and Human Services and equipment for the Medical Simulation Center. In terms of revenue, due to reducing expenditures, the use of federal relief funds and auxiliary surplus, Salisbury was able to transfer $9.4 million to the fund balance in '21. However, in '22, due to declining enrollment, Salisbury revised its tuition and fee revenues down by $4.9 million. In order to cover E&G deficits, Salisbury would have to use the auxiliary surplus and a transfer for fund balance. However, things were looking brighter at the end of December, and Salisbury expects to have an E&G shortfall of $6.4 million and auxiliary surplus of $7 million, so therefore they won't need a fund balance transfer. Salisbury does note they need to realistically assess the future state of enrollment and related revenues, and that they are currently looking for efficiencies across campus. We asked the President to comment on the budgetary impacts of enrollment projections and efforts being taken to identify efficiencies to better align the budget with projected revenues. Exhibit 11 shows a proposed budget, and after adjusting for salary increases and efficiency, state funding increases $10.9 million or 17.3%. General funds are up $11.6 million, which is slightly offset by about $700,000 decline in HEF. Increases in state funds include $4.8 million related to general salary increases, $3.3 million to restore the '21 BPW reduction, and $1 million that was mandated for funding guideline attainment. Other unrestricted revenues only increased by $2.7 million, which is related to $2.8 million increase in auxiliary, which is partly offset by about $400,000 decline in tuition and fee revenues. While the estimate was based on the planned 2% increase in resident tuition, it also includes a projected 1% decrease in undergraduate enrollment, and 2% increase in graduate enrollment. Restricted funds decreased by $8.3 million due to the reduction in federal relief funds. Exhibit 12, you can see how COVID has impacted the fiscal '21, with revenues declining $4.2 million. The loss of tuition fee and auxiliary revenues were partly offset by the use of federal funds. In '22, even though tuition fee revenues declined, total revenues increased $4.4 million, which again was due to the use of federal funds. While in '22 revenues exceed the pre-pandemic level, the composition has changed, with state funds now comprising 37% of revenues compared to 28% in 2019. Tuition and fee revenues went from 40% to 35% of revenues, and auxiliary went from 30% to 26% of revenues. Turning to personnel, Exhibit 13 compares authorized and filled positions between 19 and 22. During this time period, the vacancy rate increased from 5 to 6.8%. The largest increase in vacant positions occurred in student services, which is a concern because these are your frontline positions who work directly with the students. In auxiliary, the number of positions actually declined by 7, but unfilled positions actually increased to 12, which reflects a reduction of services in 20 and 21 and the current hiring challenges. And finally, the recommendations are to see the system-wide USM overview for system-wide recommendation, and that concludes my presentation.
Okay, very good. Good job. Any questions? Okay. Dr. White.
Good afternoon, Chair King and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today. I'm Charles White, and I'm here with several members of my senior executive staff, and we'll be able to answer any questions that you have. You may know that I announced my retirement from the presidency of Salisbury University last fall, so this will be my last time before this esteemed body, and I take this opportunity to say thank you. Over the last 4 decades, I've served in various educational roles across the country, and I can say without reservation that your ongoing and continued support of students' pursuit for a higher education makes Maryland stand out. It's a major reason Maryland continues to be a state with high educational attainment, high income potential, and one of the best places to live and raise a family. So again, on behalf of everyone at SU and on behalf of myself, now a grateful Marylander, thank you. Members of this committee are familiar with the challenges faced by higher education as a result of the COVID pandemic, and unfortunately, Salisbury University was no exception. One of the national trends that we're seeing as we slowly return to normal is that students are deciding to stay closer to home when they make their college decision. We're taking actions to address our declines in enrollment and the changing landscape of higher education. In the fall, we launched a new branding campaign for SU. It's called Make Tomorrow Yours, and this will help us tell a better story, help us better to tell the story of opportunities offered to SU's graduates. During our rebranding process, we received input from students, faculty, staff, alumni, and members of our Salisbury community, resulting in a genuine story about the SU experience. Early signs are that these efforts are paying off as our applications and deposits are already trending up and are consistent with what we saw year over year in 2019, which was our largest and most diverse admitted class. We're engaging in new outreach initiatives to bring back some of our near completers, and we've committed record funding to financial aid. The pandemic also exposed some significant areas of concern for our region and for the state of Maryland. We expanded hours and resources at our Dave and Patsy Rommel Center for Entrepreneurship, which is located in downtown Salisbury. We want to help businesses get back on their feet and continue the pre-pandemic momentum when it comes to innovation and creativity in the state. We recently established the Center for Healthy Communities in our College of Health and Human Services, with the goal of providing resources and support to historically under-resourced communities. Additionally, we're committed to increasing output in critical healthcare professions such as nursing, where our students have the highest NCLEX pass rate among baccalaureate programs in the state of Maryland. It's a real bragging point for our institution. And we're not solely focused on those needs on the Eastern Shore. Recognizing the shortage of qualified professionals in the area of mental health, we are increasing enrollment in our social work program, which is currently offered at satellite locations around the state. We're going to do our part to improve that practitioner pipeline. Over the last 2 years, we've had to set up an on-campus public health operation to serve both students and employees. We continue to test, contact trace, and provide vaccinations and other services on our campus. And that's because we decided that if we're going to be open, we're committed to doing it safely and in a way that does not present a burden to our regional healthcare system. I am proud of our ability to keep students safe and for our attention to the growing challenges related to the mental health and wellness of our students. In addition to providing in-person resources and services, we expanded operations to include on-demand telehealth visits. We've found that many of our students even prefer this way of seeking care over traditional face-to-face appointments. We also recognize that although we are dealing with the pandemic, it has affected everyone differently, particularly those who come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. At SU, we've made sure that our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion was reflected in our COVID policies and in our actions overall. As president, it's been my goal to foster an environment where everyone can feel a sense of belonging on our campus. I want to take this opportunity to thank Chancellor Perman for his team for their support during these challenging times. Chancellor Perman's leadership and that of the USM allowed us to navigate this pandemic while also maintaining our commitment to the important initiatives and programs that our students depend on. I also want to thank Sarah Baker and her team for their thoughtful analysis. It can be difficult to have someone open the books and tell us what we need to do, but Sarah's professionalism and thoroughness make that very palatable. So thank you. I believe I answered the questions during my testimony, but just to put a finer point on two things. First of all, with respect to enrollment, we are working hard to address enrollment declines by engaging in new marketing efforts. Much of our decline was the result of larger than usual graduating classes as opposed to retention decreases. So we need to bring in more students, and the early indications are that that's working. You never know what's going to happen until all the paperwork is done, but right now I am very optimistic. And secondly, with regard to education and general expenses, our employee-to-student ratio is already among the lowest in the system, but we're looking at other areas where we can cut costs without negatively impacting our students. SU has been widely recognized as a high-performance institution, and we're going to keep it that way. And with that, I want to make it clear that we are in full support of the governor's budget. I'm happy to take any questions and provide additional comments or detail with regard to the questions from the Department of Legislative Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. White. And our thanks to you for all your time at Salisbury and all you've given to our students, and it's greatly appreciated, and we wish you well in your next endeavor.
Thank you. I'm going to hang around for a couple of years and teach in the chemistry department.
Nice. Very good. Very good. And I've written a couple of recommendation letters for kids going to Salisbury, so I know they're out there for you.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any questions? Senator Alford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very briefly, Dr. White, we don't often get to have a president in front of us on a budget year that they're also retiring. So I want to take advantage of the opportunity and just ask you briefly, a minute or less, what are your hopes for Salisbury as you kind of go back to the classroom, but will still remain part of the community? But what's next? What would you envision for your successor?
So there are several things. I think we are well positioned to gradually increase our enrollments to about 10,000 students over the next, let's say, 10 years or so. And I think that one of the highest priorities that I have for the institution is finding an academic home for our College of Health and Human Services. We have tremendous programs in nursing, respiratory therapy, social work, medical laboratory science. They're all very, very high-performing programs, but they don't have an academic home on our campus. And so, well, they don't have a building. Yeah. Let's be clear.
Let's just call it what it is, yeah.
And so I would hope that my successor puts a lot of energy into solving that problem. I think that'll be great for the community.
Exactly what I wanted. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's it for you. We have one last witness here, I think. Eli Maudlin?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't care. I was just part of this group.
Okay, there you go. You had your own list here even. Okay. Happy Friday, everyone. Thank you for coming.